Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Red Docking Projections. My name is Lucas and I have Eric here as always.
Hey guys.
And today we'll be taking a look at the 2020 presidential election between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, according to the PredictIt markets. We'll be discussing what we agree with here and what we don't agree with, and I'll explain a little bit more after the intro. And with that being said, let's get right into it. So for those of you that don't know, PredictIt is a website where you can it's a betting website where you can buy shares of a certain stock of what you believe will happen in the political world. It's kind of like sports betting. You kind of bet what you think will happen. If you get it right, I think you get some money. So obviously these people are using their own money to kind of buy these shares. So obviously they want to do their best to choose the right thing instead of just, kind of being biased, because you don't want to throw around money. I can't speak today, but anyway, here's the map of every state that's PredictIt for. Essentially, for each state, they have a number between 0 and 100 cents. Basically, how much the share costs. The higher the share, the more people have paid, and they think that is the result that will happen here. So, for example, New York, 96 cents, and it's in blue, meaning that about 96% of shares are for the Democrats. That's essentially what it means here. So we're going to walk through every state, or all the important states, discussing what we agree with and what we don't agree with. We're going to first actually start off by looking at this overall thing. We have Joe Biden, 57 cents, and Donald Trump at 43 cents. Overall, I think this is a relatively accurate prediction here. Although some predictors have put it much higher, like JHK has this actually as 80% for Joe Biden. The Economist also gave it somewhere around 80. So this is pretty interesting to see that people don't really see it. They kind of see that Trump does have a higher chance compared to those other pollsters, I should say predictors. However, Trump did drop a cent, which kind of makes sense with these coming the last few days. But overall, it's definitely a lot more generous to Trump in a sense.
Yeah. What's different about this is that compared to like pollsters and websites is that these are actual people who are using their own money, as Lucas said, and this is kind of more of like a one-on-one thing. While pollsters, they are professionals and pollsters, and we always talk about how they could be polls could be swung to the left. In this case, this is the people and exactly what they think directed and converted into shares.
Right. I don't completely know how they do this, like which ones are likely, lean, and safe. But what we do know is that there are 3 types of states here. We have likelies, leans, and safes. I don't know the exact margin, but from the looks of it, it does look pretty accurate for the most part. I do agree with most of this. So let's see. So I think all these safe states definitely make sense here. Wow, Nevada actually dropped 2 cents recently. 82 cents. I'd say this is pretty accurate. Although I feel like maybe likely is a better prediction for these two. Wow, 91 for each. But overall, I do think these are relatively accurate, but people do seem to be a little bit more generous to the Democrats on this. But obviously, again, people do think the Democrats will carry these states, not really labeling it as a likely state, but in our predictions, these 3 states are likely. Same with the state of Virginia, but again, it's people doing the predictions. They're not saying it's likely. They're just saying what they think will happen. And all right, now let's talk about swing states. So the first swing state we have here is New Hampshire. New Hampshire is pretty sure going to go to the Democrats. I would say it's likely. 74 cents. That is actually less than both Nevadas. It's actually less than Nevada. But I do think there might be a chance that Trump could flip it. It's going to be a very, very slim chance. Polling does show Biden up by 3%, which is actually kind of less than I expected. But then again, New Hampshire hasn't went to Republican in a while, so I don't really see a chance of that really happening here. Okay, Eric, why don't you go ahead and just explain Minnesota and, let's see, you want to do Pennsylvania?
Sure, I'll take half and you'll take the other half. Okay. Yep. We can start off with Minnesota. Lucas, can you please hover over and let's see.
Yeah,
Sure.
and I think what we can also do is we can actually also check the progression of it over
Examine
time.
each state, yeah. So I think, yeah. So Minnesota is right now 78 cents. Um, that is that's kind of fair. Minnesota, as I said yesterday, it's been pretty rocky. Um, you can see how it's fluctuated. It's been fluctuating quite a bit. Lots of ups and downs, but I think it's kind of become steady in these
Mhm.
past few days. So what I think this means is that I think Minnesota is pretty stable, and I think in like a likely safe margin, it is going to the Democrats. The money here shows how it's pretty likely safe area.
You know, what's kind of actually surprising is that it didn't gain as much as you'd think after the George Floyd protests. It only gained about, well, not only, but about 6 cents, 71 to
Mm,
77. That's actually a lot less than I would
yeah,
anticipate here. I was expecting maybe a 10-cent gain, but then again, people did think that Minnesota would probably go to the Democrats anyway. So
yeah.
again, not really too much of a surprise here, but yeah, I definitely agree with this.
All
All
right.
right, now let's head back to the map.
So if we look onto Pennsylvania here, Lucas will hover over that. The share is at 67 cents. As we said before, Pennsylvania is kind of a battleground state. Donald Trump did take the state in 2016, so there's quite a bit of competition and pressure on Joe Biden to take it back from the Democrats. Um, Pennsylvania did go up a bit. It's not that much, but it was a very gradual increase, probably also because of the George Floyd protests. But more and more, we think that Pennsylvania is going to go to Joe Biden, and this progression kind of solidifies our claims.
Again, this is really interesting. It kind of increased a lot from 8th to 9th,
Yeah.
around 70s. We do know that there are a lot of protests in the city of Philadelphia,
Mm-hmm.
as well as Pittsburgh. I know the big cities have a lot of protests there.
I might know why it increased in that day because I don't know if it was exactly then, but I was watching TV and the news, and there
Mhm.
were some pretty serious explosions and riots going on there,
Interesting.
and that was probably like peak Democratic demand, which is probably that's why
Mhm.
there was such a spike there.
That's very interesting. What's also interesting is that it actually went down these past few days. Maybe it's the economy rebounding. Well, not they
Maybe.
didn't. Well, in a sense, it did rebound. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and
Maybe.
I
Mhm.
think that was just the peak, and maybe at this point it's just going to calm down just a little.
Yeah, that's
But
definitely.
still, yeah. We think Joe Biden will take an
Yeah,
tilt lean margin.
definitely. Now we'll head back to the national map here. All right, now I'm going to head to the state of Pennsylvania. Oh, we just did Pennsylvania. Wow. So we're going to head to the state of Michigan now. Oh, wow. Michigan is basically the same as New Hampshire. Again, interesting. We know that predictors such as Let's Talk Elections have put the state of Michigan at a likely state. Definitely possible. In our opinions, it's in between lean and likely. Not really enough to classify it as a likely yet, but whoa, same pattern as we saw before. George Floyd protests happened about here. I think it basically hit the mainstream media around the beginning of June. And again, we see that spike up here. And I think, again, these were the parts where, as Eric mentioned, these were probably where the parts where the pretty big protests were. Michigan does have a large African American electorate. Um, so that obviously is going to contribute to this election, especially if turnout goes up for the African Americans. It's going to be pretty likely that the Democrats will also Joe Biden will gain a lot of their votes because African Americans and people of color usually do vote for the Democrats. 77 at its peak. That is a lot. This is especially for a state that was taken by Donald Trump in 2016. That's a pretty big lead for Joe Biden. 73 to 27. Very interesting. And
Yeah,
again, I do think Joe Biden will learn from Hillary Clinton's mistakes in 2016. Hillary Clinton barely visited the blue wall. Joe Biden likely will learn from her mistakes. And I mean, obviously right now he can't, but in the future during this campaign season, it's likely that he will probably visit those blue wall states to try to, kind of get it back here. Um, so that will be a huge benefit to him. And I think that's it for Michigan. Let's head back to the national map now. I think we're going to do Wisconsin next. And now to our final state in the blue wall that Donald Trump carried in 2016. We have Wisconsin, 64. This is obviously a decent amount less than the other one, 78, 73. And again, the reason why is because in whoa, that's a lot of change. Okay, that's interesting. That's probably the one that changed the most here. So the stocks really did climb up after the George Floyd protests. So again, the city of Milwaukee, we had a lot of protests there. You went from, sorry, I shouldn't say you, but Joe Biden went from 55 cents all the way up to, at his peak, 66. George Floyd protests clearly did have a huge effect on this. And I think it's not only George Floyd, but it's also the coronavirus handling as well. We see Donald Trump completely dip to 35. Wow.
Also,
64.
yeah. Wisconsin is right next to the epicenter of Minnesota, and a lot of protests in Milwaukee and other big cities in Wisconsin. So, yeah, you can tell how.
Oh, that's
you can
ugly.
predict. Oh, you can predict why the stocks climbed so much. But look at that. That's probably one of the biggest changes that we're going to see today.
Definitely. And again, Wisconsin is the most likely Trump state to go to him again. I've said this multiple times, but yes, it is. It's a more conservative area, more rural towns. But wow, that's pretty interesting. I just want to take a look at this candle. I don't know. I don't think it's really showing that much. Well, that's pretty ugly. So we're gonna stick with line here. But yeah, that is Wisconsin. I think lean is the right characterization here. We put it as lean in our own predictions. That these does seem very accurate. We're gonna now head to other swing states. All right, Eric, how about you talk about the state of Florida now? I'm just gonna click on it.
Yep. So Florida's share is 57 cents. And the Republican share is 45 cents. You can see how the Democrat share is up by 12 cents. And wow, you can look at that intertwined nosedive there.
That is interesting.
And there's actually one more thing I wanted to bring into here. Very recently, Joe Biden narrowed down his VP picks to 3. Kamala Harris from California, Susan Rice, former National Security Advisor to Barack Obama, and Val Demings, police chief of Florida and current or representative there.
Yes, former police chief, current representative.
Yep. All right. So this, if Joe Biden chooses Val Demings, this can really help Florida a lot. And as you can see here, maybe when people found out that Val Demings was in the final 3, this went up and up and up and up.
Interesting.
And also, I wanted to talk about one more thing. Maybe there's a reason why the Republican stock nosedived was because Florida. I'm keeping up in the news lately that it's getting a lot of new coronavirus cases, like 3,000, 4,000 a day. And Ron DeSantis, the governor, a Republican, he's not really doing much about it, and that's not being a lot appreciating. And flights are still going on. So, and Florida to Miami to New York or wherever, those are flights that are still going on, and people fear that it could start another wave. So maybe that's another reason why the stock went down.
Yeah, talking about Val Demings, I think she does lack name recognition in Florida. I'm not sure if it will help a lot, but it will definitely help. That's definitely for sure. We do see a kind of switch here, and we got to remind our viewers that Florida does have a pretty large Hispanic electorate, and those usually vote for the Democrats here. They crisscrossed, and this is more interesting because if you guys remember, a long time ago, I think a month ago, we did an election night video on the 2020 presidential election. We actually gave the state of Florida to Donald Trump. And when we first did start this channel, Florida was, I think it was a lean state for Donald Trump, actually. So it's actually pretty interesting to kind of look at because things have changed. George Floyd protests, coronavirus handling, definitely will have a pretty interesting impact on this election. Florida, 29 electoral votes can pretty much make or break the campaign here, or the election here, I should say. So interesting here that we do see a dip for the Democrats. That's interesting, Eric. You see this? Republicans going up, Democrats are going down.
Yeah.
Recently, we got to keep in touch with Florida and the coronavirus cases here, because I think this will have a pretty big impact on the election at the end of the day.
That's definitely not done fluctuating.
Yeah. All right, we're going to head back to, let's do Arizona next. We're going to now head to the state of Arizona, as I mentioned before. Arizona is probably, I shouldn't say probably, but it is, what's the level less than probably? Whatever that is, it's, it is probably going to go to Joe Biden. 60-42, we have a pretty large Hispanic electorate. It's right bordering the state of Texas. We actually do see, a dip here in March. But obviously that has climbed after the George Floyd protests a little bit, 58-62. That is definitely interesting to kind of take a look at here. Donald Trump, around the 40s, in our opinions, Arizona is a lean or tilt. I think it's a tilt. It's a tilt. It's a tilt Democratic state. I do see that the Democrats do have a slight edge here. I think Joe Biden might carry the state. I think it's a relatively okay chance here. The source like JHK gives it a 70-something% chance of going. So yeah, that is definitely interesting to take a look at. And I actually kind of want to look deeper again. Again, we see a kind of a dip here. Something must have happened these recent few days. We see a dip for Joe Biden, a straight line for Donald Trump. I guess people are pulling out their stocks. Again, coronavirus, George Floyd protests has caused the Democrats to lead a bit in this election. So we're now going to head to the state of North Carolina. North Carolina is leaning to the Democrats here. We put this one as a toss-up. North Carolina, we have a pretty large African-American electorate here. So we see another drop from 4 cents down. Interesting. Let's look at the 30-day. Actually, let's look at the 90-day. Things have really tensed up here. The last time we did check the PredictIt, the Democrats were leading. So we checked it around at its peak, I think, June 10th, about. I think we checked it about 2 weeks ago. So we do see a drop here. And again, we see the same exact pattern as we've seen before. A raise as a result of, first of all, Trump's handling the coronavirus, which many Americans view poorly, as well as the George Floyd protests and his handling of that. And we do see a lot of protests in the city of Charlotte, which is the biggest city in North Carolina. Again, North Carolina has a pretty large African-American electorate, which is why they might be turning out more to vote, which will increase Joe Biden's numbers. If Joe Biden can carry the state of North Carolina, that'd be pretty good for him. There's a good amount of electoral votes here. The last time the state went to a Democrat was in 2008 with Barack Obama. And I think now Eric will be discussing the states of Ohio, Iowa, and Georgia.
Okay, we can move on to Iowa, Ohio, and Georgia. We thought it was necessary to touch upon these states in the predicted markets was because they have seen a bit of a drop in Republican appreciation. We can probably see that based on the shares. We can go on to Iowa. Iowa has maintained its 61 cents. This is probably the one out of the 3 states which is most likely going to go to Donald Trump.
I actually disagree. I think Georgia's probably that one, but it is pretty much equal, but I think Georgia does have a slight edge there.
All right. Moving on to Ohio.
Yep.
We have a raise of 2 cents. This is kind of interesting. We did make a video based on the polls. This was a week ago. Joe Biden was in the lead by 1 point. That's probably changed by now, which is probably why Ohio went up by 2. But either way, I think these states are all going to Donald Trump. We can take a look at Georgia now.
Yeah, in my opinion, actually, I just do want to go back to Ohio. I just want to make a point on that. In the future, I feel like we might not even be talking about Ohio. It's been swinging to the right recently. Maybe in like 2 election cycles, I don't think maybe Ohio won't even talk about anymore. But anyways, Georgia.
Yeah. So actually, now that I think about it again, this state makes the most sense why it's dropped. Rashard Brooks was killed here by the police very recently, and there was, of course, an outcry. The mayor called for the police officer to be fired, and they want justice here. So it makes sense why the Republican stake has dropped just a little.
And I think it is really interesting to see that Georgia is actually less leaning towards the Republicans than Iowa is. I know
Yeah.
Let's Talk Elections did say that they're thinking about moving Georgia to Tilt-R, which is interesting to think about. I don't think it will be a Tilt-R. I think it's a lean-R. But that is really interesting to think about here. State of Texas, I'll touch it briefly on. I don't really think that's going to go to Joe Biden. We do have a large Hispanic electorate here, but in my opinion, it'll probably go to Donald Trump again. But next election cycle, we might see some changes. And yeah, that is the end of this video today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this episode, please hit the like button. The like button. I really can't talk today. And if you like our content, please subscribe. We'll see you in our next episode tomorrow.
See ya.